Hi, Darren. Great to get the opportunity to speak with you again. And we spoke a few days ago, and you realized your true nature while watching a video of Deborah on my
Right.
YouTube. And so it would be great if you could tell us more about that and some background too.
Well, it was exactly about six o'clock in the evening of March 21st. I was listening to, I think, the second YouTube video I had listened to on your channel, and it was Deborah Discovers Her True Nature. And I mentioned this to you before I started listening. When I saw the Zoom picture of you and Deborah, I knew something was going to happen watching that. And the funny thing about it is that in that video, Deborah realizes her true nature about 50 to 55 minutes in. So it's like, when is it going to happen? But you said to her, it's okay, if there's awareness of a quiet mind or a busy mind. And that was the minute I gasped, Deborah gasped, and I saw, oh, it's awareness and everything else arises in it. And once you see that, it's just
Hmm.
everything else is fine.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So simple. Well, it's amazing the way consciousness is progressing in a way, because for quite a long time, maybe 13 or 14 years, I've been having one-to-one conversations with people, and I still do. But what's coming up recently is people realizing their true nature from watching one of the conversations, which I'm really happy about, because it just means that it's so much more available for everyone.
The only other person I've seen do one-on-one conversations like you do, where something happens, has been Byron Katie, which I think it's very interesting. If a lot of her stuff has to do with, she calls it the work, but if you can find one false belief, you really can untangle a lot of them. And I was mentioning that a lot of this had started for me about 13 years ago when I had come across some teaching materials, and something that was pretty clear was that it said, um, you know, people are highly suggestible, and you, the person reading this, meaning me, is highly suggestible, and that you might see that your personality is really a bunch of suggestions you've agreed to without ever checking out. And it just takes a second of checking into that to see that that's true. And the second thing that I had read, and this was just the first part of this teaching, was that the motivations in life can stem from defending a false picture of ourselves, putting on a front, and that we sort of keep building that up through, I think it called it greed, but they said, well, let's just say it's the desire for more, better, and different. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because that's ambition.
Yeah.
That's why I had moved to New York City, to be successful, to be respected, to be important, and it was going very well. And then I read that, and I thought, because I'd always had a sense, David, that um, I'm just off the track a little bit. Like, I'm doing great, but the path is over here. I just need to shift. But that's that meant, like, to my mind at that time, that meant, well, you should probably find a job that you is more satisfying, or you should find a job brings you more into creativity. Again, it was just a version of more, better, different. It was just a version of your mind trying to solve problems that it was never meant to solve.
Yes.
um and so I found what happened was not a surrender, but there was sort of, I call it a giving up happened. And a better way to put it, I've learned over the years, is that once you stop making things important, you have no problem with them anymore. They unfold absolutely perfectly. And this was before realizing, my true nature. So there are a lot of, while people are wanting to have this realization, there are other awakenings that happen along the way that sort of prepare you for the process and make you know, make life make life less torturous and a little more fun. And also sort of pre-integration happens for when there is understanding of awareness, because I've seen for some people it can be very turbulent afterwards. It hasn't been turbulent for me. It's really been delightful, but it was turbulent before, so it was just not linear.
Well, it was quite a dramatic step that you took, well, many years ago now, because you were telling me that you had a successful TV company, and you were just having an amazing time materially.
Yeah.
And just the information that came through, and you were blessed with some amazing teachers, which I'd like you to mention as well, because I think that people would really enjoy hearing about that process, really. But not many people do what you did. Some people decide to go to India or to follow a spiritual path, but that's usually before embarking on any kind of career. There aren't many people who just give up everything.
Yeah. Well, it didn't happen so quickly. It was sort of a gradual process, but I'll tell you a few big influences. When I was in college, so I grew up in quite a rural area, and it was quite lovely. A lot of family around. I don't know why I had an instinct to move to New York City, and something said, go there because it's the biggest city in the United States, and so you'll have the most opportunities. That was my instinct. That was really all I was thinking. And when I came here, I was very uncomfortable. I was like, why didn't I stay home with my friends? What am I doing? This doesn't feel right. But it was, once you make a big decision like that, from where I'm from, you see it through. There's just too many people.
Go back.
Yeah, when I was in college, I saw there were interviews done by Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers. Now, they were done in the 80s, and I hadn't seen them when I was a kid, but when I was in school, they were being replayed on PBS a lot, which is public broadcasting in the United States. And there's six tapes, and Joseph Campbell was sort of a famous teacher of mythology. He taught here in New York at Sarah Lawrence College for a long time. And then he sort of became very popular on sort of the human potential / Esalen crowd. And he really delivered sort of the wisdom literature in a way that was fascinating. And I had always had in my life, I'd always thought, I never bought the material as being the entire explanation of everything. Never for a second, even as a kid. Sure. I always thought, I was so curious. I said, the answers, and people have been thinking about this for thousands of years. And I said, I always thought the answer was there's an intersection of science, psychology, and spirituality in which the answer resides. And so I was always interested in science, particularly physics and quantum physics, as well as spirituality and the spiritual systems and where they came from and what they were based on, and psychology. And I thought, the way Joseph Campbell talks about Schopenhauer and Jung is, to me, just really captured my imagination. So those were really early clues from awareness, I think.
Yes.
And so I had those. I went on to get a job at a broadcaster in the United States, and I very quickly became pretty successful. I mean, it happened within 9 months, actually. I had a terrible job answering phones. They were very mean to me. It was a horrible job, very demeaning, but they call it paying your dues. But I sort of, it fueled me. I'm like, this isn't, I'm not going to succumb to this. And I became pretty successful in my 20s, and I was very pleased with myself. I thought, look at what I've done. And I told everyone, look at what I've done. I think I was pretty obnoxious. But again, while I was doing this career in television and being successful, I never let go my investigation of psychology, science, and spirituality. And so I don't know if you call that seeking. I wasn't really seeking a point of enlightenment. I was just seeking sort of, what are the clues to take me on to a more fulfilling path in life? Because I had a sense that wasn't quite right. Even though things were going really well and I was comfortable, I thought, there's some dissatisfaction. And one of the first people who was very influential and really helped me, I listened to programs this was pre-YouTube, where if you wanted to listen to a teacher or someone, give a talk, you ordered CDs from Nightingale Conant, who was one of the places where you could get, CDs that kind of sort of in the think and grow rich kind of category, but kind of practical, I would say practical spirituality, which was appealing to me because I was a practical person and let's add some spirituality to it. So I listened to a tape called The Phoenix Process by Dr. Gerald Epstein, and I recommend everyone listen to it because it helped me a lot. And two things he talks about in his tapes, he talks about what he calls the disemergency state. And what that means is that we're constantly responding to things like missing a flight or being late for work or getting a phone call with startling news. And our bodies will react to that as if it's a true emergency, as if our life is in danger. And so our bodies then get flooded with chemicals and adrenaline and all of the things that make us sick and age. And we might, when we pay attention to this, we might see we're doing this 10, 15, 20 times a day. Your heart's beating, it's racing, you're sweating, and it's not the proper response. So when you notice it happen, you just say to yourself, this is not a true emergency, and move on. It takes it down a little bit. And that was the first time I noticed it's sort of declining extreme invitations. But once you learn to decline extreme invitations, it occurs you should be declining the more subtle invitations as well that have the same impact on you. So that's why I guess I was practicing that that maybe was 15 years ago.
That's amazing.
The other thing was he talked about the yes or no phenomenon and how we're often in doubt over things that are immaterial, like which shirt should I wear today? Which tie should I wear today? And that we have to take responsibility for saying yes or no, because he had done research that showed that being in doubt had led to a lot of health problems, particularly neck and back problems, because saying yes and no does this. So the amazing coincidence was in the Phoenix Process, he talks about studying with a woman in Israel named Colette Muscat, and he studied mainly what Dr. Epstein did was he used mental imagery to help heal people, and he actually went on a lot of TV shows at the time because he was controversial. Back in the 80s when he first started doing that, it was not mainstream, and he was considered a quack.
Yes,
there was a lot of derision. After listening to the tapes for a few years, I asked a friend of mine from Israel, I said, he says he studied with this woman, and you said you once visited what you called the wise woman of Israel. Is this the same woman? And she said, yes, Colette Muscat. And I said, well, this is so strange. And I went to his website, Dr. Epstein's website, and I found out he's here in New York City. And I called him and I said, can I come meet you? And so I went and met him. And it was funny. I was so nervous being away from the office because you never went away from the office in those days, even for a doctor's appointment. I sat in his office and I didn't hear a word he said. He talked to me for an hour. And I thought maybe this is going to be like a mystical experience where I meet a guru and I'm overcome. But no, I was just sitting there like, I got to get back to work. But when I left the office, he handed me a big stack of papers and he said, would you read the first chapter in this papers? It's 5 pages or 6 pages, and call me in a week. And if you're interested, we'll we'll talk every week. There's 48 of them. And I thought I must have misunderstood him. He's going to call me for the next year every week and talk about this. But he did. And what they was called The Science of Man by Robert Gibson. And that's where I first started to see the nature of the personality and the nature of ambition. And it occurred to me in about 5 minutes after reading that ambition was about the same as a drug addiction. That more, better, and different were going to lead you nowhere good. So I didn't do anything, but I sort of disengaged from the career. It all seemed kind of fruitless to me, and it fell away. And it was painful because, when you lose something, it's painful. And during that process, I actually said, maybe I've made a mistake. And I went back and I got another fantastic job. And again, and it was with wonderful people, lovely people, but in the system, I was so uncomfortable. That took 3 years to get out of that. So it took 4 years to get out of the first job and 3 years to get out of the second. So this is a process of disengaging over 7 years. So it was actually helpful because by the time I was out of it for a couple of years, the pandemic came along and then no one had to do anything. So it was very nice.
It's quite unusual though, because being successful in the world, it's often difficult to achieve. So to just kind of to achieve that and then give it up is something that not many people would be willing to do that.
Yeah, and I don't know if I didn't give it up. It gave something. There was a sort of a giving up that happened, but something else was happening at the same time, which is that I was teaching. Had been asked to go teach at the same university I'd come to New York to go to, and I'd been asked to teach because I was sort of known and successful and at the time, and that fills up classrooms. And the moment I walked into the classroom, I had done a lot of sort of guest speaking at this university beforehand for some years, and they eventually, because academics move very slow, they eventually said, we'd really like to offer you an adjunct teaching position. And I just loved it. And I loved it so much that first thing I said to myself, don't do too much of it because you'll ruin it. So, and then this moment I said that to myself, they emailed me, they said, there's 30 people on your wait list. Would you teach another class? And I thought about it. I was like, I had said, don't do this. So I'll teach another class. And this really, this had really, really saved me from unplugging from my business career, because I had understood from listening to The Science of Man, the Robert Gibson, which is on, you can find it on the website. He's not very well known, but he's very practical. He was a Kentucky person who kind of did his teachings from the 60s. I think he died in 1994. But one of the things he sort of boiled his teachings down to keep the mood up and don't make anything important.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, the key to life is doing things that make you enthusiastic.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that your mind is always putting out a lot of effort to make you do things that you're enthusiastic about. And that's not the right way to do it. So I loved teaching. I also knew I could not like it by forcing it or by doing too much of it, and then I should just let it unfold naturally.
In that first conversation, I remember you saying that teaching is the one thing where you just feel this energy flowing through you, and it's when you feel most alive, and that you just seem to be totally on track while you're teaching. And so that's a description of functioning from your infinite nature, really, rather than from the mind. So It's
Yeah.
so often people have actually been functioning from effortless being for quite a long time creatively, and that seems to be, the foundation, from which realization can arise.
Yeah, that's right, because I think I had mentioned that it seemed to me that every time I stopped making something important, it would start working.
Mm.
So I stopped making it important that I was teaching, because I didn't really think they would keep asking me back if I wasn't at the top of the success of the food chain in media, because I was there to
Yeah.
teach media.
Yes.
And actually, I asked a colleague of mine about that, the person who had hired me, and he's been a great mentor over the years.
Mm.
I said, what do you do when you become irrelevant? And he said, you'll never, he said, you've been out there, you've come here to share your experience. You're not irrelevant. You have to
Mm.
tell them what it's like out there. They want to know.
Yes.
And that really gave me a lot of confidence. And once I had confidence, I knew what to do. And I knew I wasn't just there to teach them skills. I wasn't there to teach them about, doing financial models or making deals, or, I knew I was there to try to help them align with their purpose in life.
Mm.
And so much revelation. There's been a lot of bad stuff in the media, especially in the news and stuff, that affects, but a lot of I watched those Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers interviews on PBS, and I think there's a lot of people who may have realized their true nature, or are in that neighborhood, who are making TV shows and films. And I
Yes.
think that's becoming an increasing way of awareness revealing itself to
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's amazing, really, that's happening. But I think even with your teaching, um, what's really coming through is it's the self revealing itself to itself. So even when you're teaching film and TV or media, it's actually to do with the alignment, with the one infinite being, and the more that it is present, then the the practicality of the course obviously is all part of it, but there's something much deeper than that, and I think that's how people are inspired, and that's why you had many more people coming to do the course and really inspired to come and to do it with you.
It's true. And this last year I've had a lot of courses, and they're wonderfully, they're very reinvigorating. And I've noticed that a lot of my colleagues are in their 80s, and
Wow.
they bounce around, and they have lots of energy, and I can see that they're sort of dipping into the same energy system. And in giving as much energy to the students as they do, they get even more back.
Yes.
And those are the real teachers that love walking into that room.
Mm.
And I realized that I don't have to be in a classroom for that. And even before the video I watched on March 21st, I did realize that I really can be open to what's going on in front of me. I always say to my students, if you have any regrets in life, it's because you didn't see the opportunity in front of you. So there might be someone in the room, and you think, well, they have nothing to do with me, I'm not going to talk to them. But you have to see what's in front of you. Yet I wasn't always doing this. And I learned a lesson about this, which is that, I take my dog for a walk. I'm close to Central Park. We have a lot of tourists in Central Park. And I kind of would be in a bit of a hurry, because, we have, 30 minutes, take the dog out, come back. And I would get stopped a lot by families who were visiting. oh, can we pet your dog? She's a beautiful beagle. And I'm in a hurry, but okay, I'll stop and we pet the dog. And it happens so often. And people would be like, so I stopped. I was like, okay, what's going on here? And they'd start showing me pictures of their dog at home. And what I realized is that here they are visiting New York City. They want to see the sights and all of the attractions. But in Central Park, they've met a dog that reminds them of their dog at home. And what they really want is the comfort of home. And the highlight of their trip is this 20-minute encounter they family had with a dog in Central Park that reminded them of their dog or their beagle or their dog they left, is home waiting for them, who's going to greet them when they go home. And so that's sort of like being in the classroom, is just suddenly when you're open and available, you find out you have a purpose in almost every moment.
Yes. Yeah, that's great the way you describe that, because the funny thing is that seeking is the sort of mode that we find ourselves in, but actually, as you say, everything we need is right in front of us, and so because the infinite self is effortless, then exactly the right people show up, the situations are there. So if we stop listening to the mind, which is saying that it's over there somewhere, right, and we look at what's right in front of us, then it's much more efficient that way.
Yeah, the thing we were taught, which is to set a goal and go after it, is the thing that prevents us from seeing the opportunity.
Yeah, that's great, actually. Yeah, so true.
And it's so close, and it's why when your mind, because you say, I've set this goal, I'm going over here, and I'm determined to. And so awareness will say, but it's right here. Look right here. I see that, but I'm going over. I have to go over here. I can't stop, And so we rush past this. So my advice to my students of look at what's in front of you. I'm not following myself, until it's kind of really hits you on the head that
yes,
everything is being delivered to you,
yeah,
and you're not paying attention. That's how it was for me. And because you just, I can't sit and do nothing. That's so irresponsible. I can't not have a goal and a plan. I can't not have a list of things to accomplish today. These things are, they're really hardwired into us from, the way we've been taught that if you're going to be a valuable member of society, this is how you have to be. And it takes a lot of, you personally have to say that's not the way it is. You really do have to experience it yourself. You can't take anyone else's word for it. You just because you've taken someone else's word that you have to set goals and accomplish things.
Yes.
And that doesn't work. So they're just I think if people just sort of start small. I was telling you a great story about this apartment, which was we were moving to this apartment. This was about 15 years ago, from a place we really loved, beautiful, wonderful neighbors. We had a lot of friends. And it was kind of difficult moving here because the building was making it difficult to fix some things that needed to be fixed. And I said that morning, I think we're just gonna have to face the facts that we're moving into an unfriendly building and maybe we won't live there for very long. It was a Saturday morning, and a Saturday night, Gerald Epstein used to have salons at his house, and he would and this is kind of a funny thing. You'd think you're in New York City, you just open up your apartment to whoever shows up, but that's what he did. And he would give talks, and so about 30 or 40 people would show up. He did it 4 times a year, and he would feed everyone. He would have food out. His wife would put a big, we'd all eat afterwards and talk. And that night he was talking about Rupert Sheldrake and morphic fields, and that was the first time I'd heard about Rupert Sheldrake and morphic fields. And while I was sitting waiting, while we were all coming in, a woman was sitting next to me, and she said, "Well, what brings you here?" And I said, "Oh, I met Dr. Epstein a few years ago, and he helped me with some teachings." And she said, "Oh, that's nice." She said, and I said, "I wasn't going to come tonight because I'm moving, and it was, I'm really I'm glad I'm here because it's gotten my mind off of it. And she said, oh yeah, where are you moving? I said, well, I live on the Upper West Side. And she said, oh really? I do too. What street? And I told her. She said, I live on that street. And I said, what address? And I told her. She said, I live in that building. And she said, what apartment? And I told her. She said, I'm your neighbor. So, you know, you might want to calculate the odds in a city of 7 million people, how in the morning I said, we're moving into a building of unfriendly people. I would meet a wonderful neighbor at a salon across town, of which 40 people, it just, and you know, and that really, it's sort of, I was dumbfounded because I was like, this is obviously something big. And
it's so clear, isn't it? Yeah.
But I don't know what it means or how to make sense of it, or and you know, one of the things they teach us in business school, which is that they teach you people believe in coincidences, and that's a good way to sell things to them, because there's no such thing as coincidences. What we do is we say washing machine, and suddenly you think you need a new washing machine, and you start seeing washing machines everywhere. And it's just the mind. It's just the way the mind works. And so these people who have no idea how the mind works, other than the fact that it's a calculator that regurgitates things, are mixing up the mind and higher intelligence. And so when something like that happens, when you meet your neighbor in a city of 7 million at a salon, it really shatters a lot of, you know, that's not something that is probable over the course of, I don't know, millions of years.
Yeah, that's just amazing. It was you were certainly being directed to look at something in a slightly different way.
And I did. I said, we're moving into a building of friendly people. And we did indeed move into a building of friendly people. And it was awareness telling me, they're people. If they're not friendly, it's because you see them as not friendly. If they're friendly, and that was really clear to me. Yeah. And when we moved in here, we had nothing but friendly neighbors.
So specific, isn't it? It's like the line in the Course in Miracles, which says everything only has the meaning we give to it. So yeah, you're getting a pretty clear bit of guidance there.
That's right. That's right. And so over the past, while the past years had been pretty nice, while I wasn't in the classroom, I was making a big effort to keep myself in a higher state of consciousness, in a good mood, because I thought, well, stay in a good mood all the time, you know, work really hard to stay in a good mood. And I thought, well, how could I do this? And there were people that I really liked listening to speak. Dr. Epstein had passed away in 2018, but he had a lot of recordings. And so I would listen to him because it was, you know, just, he had reminded me, and he had a nice energy. And so I started finding other people that would sort of elevate my mood, and I would download lots of podcasts, and it's pretty effective. It's a pretty effective way, and you learn a lot, and it does help you keep your mood up. And then I had come across, in all of my podcasts, I was sort of working my way back in time, and I hit a certain point where Rhonda Byrne was in all of them. And I thought, it's very strange because I knew she didn't do a lot of media. And I was very aware of The Secret because I had read it and watched the movie. And in about 2018 or 2019, I was running a TV network, and I thought, we should run The Secret because it's been out for a few years. I'm sorry, this was about 2009, this is about 2009. We're sort of in the 2010 global financial crisis, recession. I thought it would be, you know, it'll help the world. Let's run The Secret. And so I got the approval to ask Rhonda if we could license it. And so we contacted her, and she said, I'll think about it. And she got back to us the next day and said, no, I don't think it's a good idea. Which I was shocked at, because I said, oh, we have to call her back and tell her I've already manifested it. She's mistaken. but she really understood the way the media worked, in that, you know, she could see that, if I think back then, if she had done too many interviews and if she had done too much exposure, you know, because a lot of people really didn't like The Secret. They found it insulting, they found it stupid. And she just, you know, she didn't want to argue with people. If it works for you, fine. If it doesn't, you know, that's fine. There's no sense in you know, so I actually trusted. I knew I could trust her decision. But when she showed up in all these podcasts, I thought, well, this is so funny. She's not been around for, you know, she doesn't do a lot of interviews, and I resisted listening to them because I thought maybe she's just talking about The Secret. And but I started listening to one, and she had such a energetic, you know, in my intention was to keep my mood up, and she was really someone I liked listening to. But I didn't know what she was talking about. She was talking, we were never born, we never die, there's no time. I thought, well, she's gone mad with all that money, all that money from The Secret made her crazy. But I loved listening to her. And then I went and I looked at her Facebook Lives, and it's just this energy coming out of it. And she was just, I'm waiting in line at the grocery store listening. Of course, she talks about you a lot. And so I went and I found your interviews on Conscious TV. I found your YouTube channel, and I sort of skipped ahead to you have 4 videos called Name of Person Realizing Their True Nature. And I knew instantly that's where it was going to happen. I didn't even know what was going to happen. I just knew whatever Rhonda was talking about and whatever you were talking about on Conscious TV, that was going to be the final piece. And it was. It clicked into place in a second. Previously I had really put my mind in charge of monitoring my mind. Just didn't, you know, you can't, there's no one draws a picture of awareness. No. And the thing is, awareness is the whole thing. It's not a function of the mind. I thought it was a function of the mind for so long. And it's, you are able to point out what awareness is. And when it's seen, and everything falls into place. And so that happened in just in seconds. And I could feel I could feel a sort of a change. I wasn't in ecstasy or bliss or anything like that, but I could feel a shift in my molecules or my cells or something, like I had just clicked into place.
Wonderful.
And, you know, and I don't think it's not like a miracle to achieve. It's not a goal to attain. It's it doesn't stop the mind from doing all of the things it did before, but it does. 2 things happen for me. And one is I could say, oh, this is why things unfold. You don't have to make that happen. In fact, every time you try to make something happen, you stop it from happening. And so when I understood that all of these things were unfolding, if I'm resting as infinite intelligence, then there's really nothing else to worry about. And you can get a phone call, and someone yesterday I got a phone call, and the character of Darren would normally be pretty angry with the content of the phone call. And I laughed because I said, I'm going to go play the character of Darren, and Darren's going to play an angry character. But it's so funny because you're not really mad, you know, you're just playing your part. And you feel, I felt a little bad because the other person was like, okay. I was like, okay, I we'll do another take. I won't be quite so angry in this take. You're playing your character better than you ever played your character before.
Yeah,
you really, you know. So the individuality, though you're not identified with it, you can embody it and live through it in a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. That's a great story.
And then, you know, after that, I started, this was March 21st. And what I thought was interesting was March 21st was my father's birthday. My father may understand his true nature. I'm not sure he ever listens to stuff like this. But he's been a great, both my parents are wonderful people, and have been great influence in my life. But that March 21st was my father's birthday. And that day I was in quite a good mood. I had taught that morning. I had walked the dog in the park. I called my father and we had a nice chat, and it was sunny. And I came home and I started listening to your YouTube channel, and that made everything so much easier. And after that, all of a sudden, there were all of the clues that had been building up for the 50 years of my life. All of the clues just, they were all around the room. I had mentioned when I was to you, David, that when I was in my early 20s, I had really gotten a big fear of time passing. Like I was very like horrified. I would wake up in the night just terrified of time passing. And my idea was that if I wrote a book, it would help stop time. It would like put it into a volume that couldn't move through time. Actually, and it's interesting, it's what Byron Katie says to do with your thoughts, is write them down, because now they're on paper and you can deal with them. Maybe I was doing something like that, but I wrote these books. I wrote a series, and they were about, one was about a child prodigy who saves the world but can't do it again. So they make a clone of, the government makes a clone of him. And the clone is the only person who's not taken in by this energetic system. And so he is able to save the world. And then there was another book that I wrote that was about child prodigies. They were musical prodigies, and they intervene in a global war between government and business. And they're able to intervene in a global war between government and business because they're using infinite intelligence, their children, and the power of music. And the book is actually, they use natural forces like swarms of bees to fight technology. And when I look back at these books, they were messages to myself in the future.
Yes.
They were almost like, Darren, you're about to go on this journey of ambition and adventure, and you're going to forget yourself. So write it down, and it's going to be there for when you want to come back to it, and you're going to remember it when you're having troubles. And it's funny, the books were published maybe 10 years after I wrote them. And they sort of came back, and I saw some of the clues in them at the time, and they did sort of help me along the path. But now it's amazing. And I mentioned this before, there's a portion of the book where the clone, who's a 7-year-old, he's not even 7, he's like maybe 2 years because they accelerated his aging. He has a dream, and in the dream there are 5 boys, and each of those boys is represented by one of the koshas.
Amazing.
Which I had learned correctly from Joseph Campbell, from the body up to the body of bliss,
yes.
Instead of from the body of bliss the other way. But they serve a purpose in his dream of showing him the way, of showing what he needs to do. So it's startling to, like, David's talking about the koshas. I wrote about them in the book when I didn't know what I was writing about, really.
You're a time traveler. That's amazing.
Through no time, I was traveling, yeah.
And you mentioned that there was a point at which you knew that there was going to be realization when you saw the videos where people were realizing their true nature. When did that happen, Darren?
It happened exactly what happened. I was watching you on Conscious TV. I scrolled to the next video, and just as we have on Zoom 2 panes with our faces, it was you and was it Rika? I forgot who it was.
Oh yes, Rika Markle.
So, but when I saw you and Deborah, the next video, because I watched that one, but when I saw the next one and I saw your expression and her expression, it hit me, realization would happen in that video. Amazing. And the funny thing was, in that video, it's you're usually, you know, the one with Ted, I think they sort of happen about 30 minutes in. People in the ones you've posted, people kind of realize. In this one, it was about 50 minutes. I kept looking. It was about 50 minutes in, and Deborah hadn't realized her nature, nor had I. And you said to her what you said to her about it's okay if the mind there's awareness of a busy mind or a calm mind. There's awareness, and she gasped, and I gasped, but I knew right when I saw. I knew right when I hadn't even started playing the video. I knew right when I saw your face and Deborah's face that was where it was going to happen. And you know, it's funny. It's almost it's like Rupert Sheldrake explains morphic resonance.
Yes.
And telepathy and things happening before things happen before they happen in time. So like things happened in my life that are appropriate for my stage in life now, because they've all built up to help me sort of integrate this very quickly.
Yes.
And I feel like all of the pieces of integration were put in place, you know, and then we put the cherry on top with the realization.
Yeah. But even the declining of invitations, you were familiar with that process, really. Probably 14 years ago or so, maybe.
Yeah, and one of the things I learned from Dr. Epstein and also from Robert Gibson was that a good way to decline invitations is to actively act them out. So if something makes you fearful, you say, I'm going to be really fearful. I'm going to go do this really scared. Or something makes you angry. You're like, here, I'm going to get even angrier. And by really taking it on, you completely disempower it. Because by declining invitation, you know, until you can really regard the mind as sort of a kind of a loud child that is fine, like let him talk, it's okay. But until you can sort of see that, you're kind of repressing invitations. So I thought, you know, at the time it was really effective to like I'm free to be scared, I'm free to be angry, I'm free to experience anything that arises. And that was a really good practice that I had taken on. And one of the things that you said to me when we spoke a couple weeks ago was, you said they're predictable. Like they come when you sort of least expect it. And I was saying how often I said I would be like, you know, in the park walking my dog on a nice day, and suddenly I'm sort of having an argument in my head with someone. But you know, they're so predictable, and they're fine. You know, you don't have to make a big deal out of your mind. You can just let your mind do what it does.
Just disregard it, really, rather than having to process anything sometimes.
Yeah. You just drop it. But I think that just, you know, it's funny just knowing that they're so predictable, you know, and they have a pattern. You can see there might be 2 or 3 familiar places where you're not paying attention, or attention is, you know, it's like when you're doing something, like when you're on you know, driving a different way, or you're in a different place, you're paying attention. And so you don't have so much, even if you were meditating or you're consciously paying attention, you don't have so much availability to be delivered invitations, but they'll always find a way.
Yes.
And so it's fine. So you just have to see that it's fine. And also, and you know, and sometimes you consciously accept them and they run away from you. They're like, what are you doing? Yeah.
You mentioned the kind of acceleration which took place for you, and it was within a few years, really, wasn't it, leading to realization? Could you say a bit about that, Darren?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery to me why it accelerated. I think that I spent a long time. The Robert Gibson's recordings, I spent a lot of time listening to. And one of the things I wasn't really getting out of them, or I was getting frustrated, was I wasn't really hearing him say that awareness is, he would talk about, where to put the sense of I, but he was doing this in the 60s and 70s. And so I had to realize he was operating in a different context, in a different time. And so the way he was explaining awareness to people, to me, sounded like you really should be vigilant and monitor your mind all the time. It wasn't not what he was saying. That's what I was hearing. And it was becoming exhausting. And I would listen to it. Sort of, I had a routine, or I'd listen to it every day, sort of getting ready in the morning. And I'd just play it on my phone. And he has so many talks. There are hundreds of them, and a couple of his students keep different websites where they're on. But I occurred to me that I had to take a break from this, because I was sort of wearing myself down, trying to always be in a good mood, trying to always keep my mood up, trying to really understand that what he called not I's, you call invitations, but not I is any negative emotion, and that you can see that they're always lies. Anything derogatory, anything you say that's derogatory about yourself or others is a lie. This is great to know, but it's hard when you don't have awareness to put the mind in charge of policing itself, because it's generating those and policing it. So you've really created a perpetual motion machine of torture. So that was sort of the last thing. And it had been so helpful to me in my life that I really felt, disrespectful by disengaging. But I wanted to listen to some, I remembered I like science, I like spirituality, I like psychology. So I just started listening to other people. And there was I felt an acceleration, and it was obviously awareness was pulling me. It was enough time here. It's time we go here. It happened I think maybe in February. I just started listening to a lot of different podcasts. I listened to Bernie Siegel, is a great person to listen to. He's a doctor. I listened to Louise Hay. She talks about looking yourself in the mirror, looking at yourself and giving yourself positive affirmations. I listened to just people that were saying the same things, but in different ways. And so I had all of these podcasts I like listening to, and eventually, very quickly, I mean, from February to March 21st, it all led to hearing about The Greatest Secret, the teachers in The Greatest Secret, a lot of which I had known before. I had spent many years actually listening to recordings of David Hawkins.
Yes.
And some of his recordings were fascinating, but he scared me, because he would talk about the void. And he would talk about meditating and getting to a place where there was blue in the mind. And so I remembered, and I had listened to David Hawkins a long time ago. His sort of scared me because he said there's no person there. And that was really frightening. Because when you think about that, you don't exist and there's no person there, and you're in the middle of a successful career,
yes.
You don't want to hear that.
No.
But anyway, a lot of the teachers I had listened to, but as I said, when I came across your channel, it happened so fast. I can't explain why I have a resonance with what you're saying. But you've often said this, that if a person has a resonance with another person, that's a, to follow that, because now there's a lot of teaching available, and there's a lot of people who are sharing this, and it's like with it's like in Rupert Sheldrake's book, when he talks about, when one animal on one island learns a behavior, and then the same animals on a completely different island with no communication suddenly learn that behavior. And so awakening is, I think, the same process.
Yes.
It's happening.
Definitely. Yes. And then we see that we are that field, we are the morphogenetic field.
Right. And the understanding is like, a lot of this stuff, you kind of feel foolish afterwards, because it's like, well.
It's an amazing game of hide and seek, Darren, isn't it, really?
It is. And it really is. And it's amazing that it's amazing that I would go for so long with so much really direct material in front of me, and really a curiosity about all of it, and it's amazing it eluded me for so long. But
you're in an amazing position, really, being in education, because I'm sure there are going to be students where there is all your students seem to be functioning on the basis of resonance anyway, which is why they're showing up to, it'd be really interesting to see how many of them are ready. I think in the same way as you recognized the moment for realization, there'll also be the clarity in seeing those who are ready, where you can have a conversation with them.
Yeah, it will be interesting. And I think I think a lot of people, we were talking about before, when I was working a lot and people would stop by my office, a lot of people, I think knowing the difference between people who want a little bit of comfort, and knowing the difference between people who want, awareness. I think I have a good instinct for that. But what you were saying recently, you were doing an interview for a couple of years ago, and you had said you had kind of changed your thinking about the process of determination, and that you felt, I guess you had a student who realized his true nature in about 100 days without ever really knowing about anything like that before. And can you explain how the determination plays a part in that?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think, as you were saying, the way consciousness is constantly evolving, you can relate to teachers from, say, back in the 60s, the 70s, 80s, but you can see that there's this refinement, because it's the infinite being which is revealing itself to itself. And so it's doing that in a way which is progressive. And so it seems as though we're getting these clues along the way. But as you were saying about teaching, one of the most amazing things about teaching is that it's an opportunity for the deepest kind of learning, because you're learning from all the people that you have conversations with. And really, determination, it became apparent that that's an aspect when the clarity around the koshas came in, because determination normally is something related to the mind. So people have determination to achieve something on an individual level. So they're determined to create something, or to do something. But the determination in relation to enlightenment is coming from the body of wisdom, or from effortless being. So it's a determination of a different nature, really, because it's coming from one's own inner knowing. And so that's the difference, really. But that quality seems to be available in the morphogenetic field now, so that where people do have that sense that realization is attainable, then with that determination, where they're aligning with their infinite nature rather than with individuality, then the opportunity is there, and it's there really clearly. And in the same way as you just knew when you saw the video that there was going to be realization, and that it's that kind of clarity that comes through. So it's the determination. It's a kind of inner knowing, one could say.
And I think part of the determination is that when you listen to a teacher like yourself speaking about this, the first time you listen to it, it might come through the mind and be filtered. And the second time you listen to it, it might be filtered through the mind in a different way. At a certain point, it gets registered directly into awareness. And you're listening. So I will have the experience. I was watching yesterday your talk with Ted, because your talk with Ted, I hadn't really influenced me the way the others did. And I wanted to go back and see what I missed. And I watched it a couple times, and suddenly, he didn't say this last time. He didn't say that last time. He did. And all of it was being registered directly in awareness. And I think sometimes, so the determination is, there's just a bit of repetition to hear the things that I missed, because I missed so many things. I missed so many things in a lot of the things I listened to, but by listening to a lot of your talks again, I want to explain how to listen to it, but I can't. You're listening to it in a way that you're not making commentary, or it's not an intense focus, but something happens if you listen to something with a quiet, relaxed focus.
Yes,
it becomes registered directly in awareness, and you're hearing things you've never heard before, and it's shocking. Like, it's like, he didn't say this last time. Did he re-record this? So I think that's an example of determination, and I understand what you mean now.
I think the reason people like to show up, when you're teaching, is there's definitely been the sort of foundation of being able to function from effortless being or the body of wisdom for a very long time for you. And something that's really apparent as well is the way the body of bliss is also available, because there's something really amusing in the way you deliver things. Like, you have this really light way where it's, you're delivering things in a way where there's real clarity. And then you kind of collapse that into humor. And I think that's that can really only happen when there's the clarity in terms of functioning from your infinite nature and through effortless being, and then having access to the body of bliss as well. So it's and I think that's what everyone wants. Everyone wants that combination.
In talking about the function of media with my students, the impact of comedy or comedic content, stuff that makes you laugh, that actually shatters all of the programming.
Yes.
When it works.
Yeah.
Humor shatters all of that. It's actually it's a wonderful shortcut.
Yes.
Out of torture, out of
Yes.
pain. There's the great story of Norman Cousins watching all of these candid camera reels and healing himself from an illness.
Yes.
And a lot of people who sort of say, I'm just going to watch comedic content, and so yeah, I come from a family of people who have a great sense of humor, and a lightness about a lot of things. When I was growing up, I had a lot of very older relatives. We were always at a funeral, and they were sort of, they had lived into their 80s, and you would see people laughing about life, and so it's funny. I mean, it's great that it's funny.
Yes. Well, with even with a joke, you can see how jokes collapse the sort of intensity of the mind, because the mind is just really logical. So when the the joke is being sort of delivered to begin with. There's this sort of lead up to something, and it's all very logical and believable, and the mind's totally, believing the whole story. Yeah. When the punchline's delivered, we're catapulted straight into the body of bliss, because the logic of the mind can no longer follow there. So that the whole of the reality of that concept that was being delivered just collapses, and then what is left is bliss. And so you can just see that in itself reveals the kind of sequence in that bliss is primary. Yeah. And then effortless being emerges from there, and then the mind emerges from there, and then the emotions, and then the physical realm. But that's even jokes are delivering profound wisdom, really.
Because I know you have some teachers that you like listening to because they're funny.
Yeah.
Is it Roger? I forgot his last name.
Oh yeah, Roger Linden and
Roger Linden. I've listened
as well. Yeah, Tony
Parsons. Yeah, Tony Parsons, right?
He's a bit a stand-up comedian. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
So, humor is a really great path to follow.
It is. And it's amazing sequence. As I've said many times, for everyone their path is unique, but yours has been, there are some great elements within your realization, and some great synchronicities, and just amazing, really. But you're such an amazing communicator and have such a depth of knowledge. So I'm sure people are going to be coming your way, really.
Well, I've been very, very lucky. I've always said I'm very lucky. And I'm very lucky that I had the parents I had and the family I had, and lucky that I met people like Gerald Epstein and people who I work with at the university now, who are also mentors to me. One of the things in life, when other people believe in you, you can do a lot, because it's easy not to believe in yourself. But when someone else says that they're confident, they show you that they see something in you. It's a great gift to that person, because you start to believe in yourself. And I think one of the things that's at play with you, and why so many people are finding there's true nature by listening to you speak, David, is because you believe in people's ability to do this. And so you give people a confidence that they maybe wouldn't normally have. You certainly gave me that confidence. Just listening to the ease of your talking with David and with Renata and Ian McNay, when you see that, I just felt a great confidence in listening to you, and I think a lot of people must also.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's really easy when when we just see life as oneness, because everything is just arising in the one infinite being. So it's like the line that Ramana Maharshi said. Somebody said to him, "Oh, do you believe in telepathy?" And he said, "Well, I would if there were two of us."
Which is a great explanation of how telepathy works.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Darren. That's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you, David. Thanks for I feel like I've known you for a million years, but it's really a lot has happened since March 21st, it's unfolding, and I'm available for everyone who wants to speak, and it's just nice to know that the path unfolds as on its own accord, and yes. You're not a lazy person for letting but the way and your example of that is people always like concrete examples to learn from, and you're a concrete example of how that happens. even through your artwork and through really and through all of the things that you've done in your life, David, which have been inspired by creativity and by allowing and by being available.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Yeah, it was going to be some amazing things happening for us all, I think.
Yeah. So thank you so much, David.
Yeah, thank you too, Darren. It's been wonderful to meet you.